Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Riff Worship podcast. Join with me, as always, are the two biggest schlubs I've ever met in my entire fucking life. Austin Paulson, Sugar Grove's own mailman of sorts. How you doing, bud?
Damn.
Roll with it.
I'm schlubby. That's like the Futurama bit where it's like, Fry, you look like a fat sack of crap. A sack? I'm doing all right.
How's the mailman business treating you, Austin?
Man, I got those calves. Got those good calves.
Hey man, just like Karl Malone.
Right. Yeah. I'm Austin's John Stockton. What are you doing? You're the coach. Just like your middle school basketball team.
Oh,
Again.
junior high basketball manager. That's what I was. Yeah.
Damn.
It was a free period, man. I got an hour and a half in the middle of the day that I did nothing. Dylan, go get us some water bottles.
I imagine Dylan getting into it, wearing a suit with a clipboard and just fucking breaking it over some poor kid's head.
He's got the X's and the O's.
Yeah.
Like first you ooga and then the other guy boogas.
But he still doesn't know anything about basketball.
So I was at a game one time, and the coach looks at me. The coach was 6'6", all legs too, and he was like, "So it's just neck to legs, right?"
What a tall drink of water.
And he was like, "Dylan, I need you to count all the turnovers in this game. I've really got to like talk to the guys about it." And I know what a turnover is. I knew what it was. There were 96 turnovers from our team in that game, and I like, he's already livid about the game. They're in the locker room, and he's like, I kind of like, "Hey, coach, what's going on?" I leaned in. I was like, "There are 96 turnovers in the game." He goes, "Let me have the clipboard." He goes, he's like, "Just go sit over there." And he flings that fucking clipboard at the whole, it was an away game at the lockers. It just fucking hits it. And he goes off for like 10 minutes. And he's like, "All right, back on the floor." Just immediately, I went, "All right."
Coach, I didn't see any pastries out there.
Were you waiting the whole time?
Oh my God. It was tearing me up inside.
I was hoping, Dylan, you were going to say he flung the clipboard at the whole team. Like somehow it acted like a boomerang. Like the kids were sitting at you and it hit all of them and came back to him.
This man was 6'6" of vitriol. He used to have to drive his wife's Volkswagen Beetle to work. It was one of those like early 2000s green ones. He would keep stepping out of that thing. Legs just, it looked like it looked like a Schoolhouse Rock cartoon or something. Just like legs on top of legs coming out of this thing. Motherfucker would show up to work on occasion with a banjo and just let it fucking rip too.
Hell yeah. And speaking of music that has more parts than Schoolhouse Rock songs.
Yeah, I just reviewed the new Nile record. Talk about parts.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
I mean, on par with what we're talking about this week. There's some very Sesame Street aspects to this, and some very like Schoolhouse Rock, and tongue and tongue firmly planted in cheek, boys. What we're talking about today, we are going into Ghost, Opus Eponymous, and these guys really, 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 really like Satan a lot.
Yeah.
They like it.
It's every song is an ode to Beelzebub, or
old Nick himself.
the Morning Star.
The Morning Star.
That's those
Chief Rebel
vegan,
Angel.
That's those vegan sausages, right?
See, you got me there, man. That's the whole reason. That's the whole thing behind it, right? That's why I started eating those goddamn things.
Veiny sausages.
Variety sausages. About as much meat in those as there is in one of those Morningstar patties.
I would have I would have never. I messaged y'all this in our group chat, but I would have never been allowed to listen to this growing up.
Yeah.
If it had come out in like the 90s, my dad would have heard it once, and that would have been it. That would have been the only time he ever heard it.
See, I did want to ask about this because I feel like maybe, I don't know about Dylan specifically, but I feel like we all maybe grew up in varying degrees of Christian household. But this was giving me flashbacks to some sweaty churches. That's all I can say. The thing about growing up Catholic is that none of the music is fun. It's very boring, and it's all in Latin. And this, if this had been it, I've been sold. Sign me up for that Satan church, bud.
We are.
Without getting, I could tell stories about my dad for hours, and y'all know this, but
as we all could.
But
it's not a Friday.
My dad literally believed that reading Harry Potter would allow me to summon the devil, and he also believed that like playing Dungeons and Dragons would allow people to summon the devil. So like he would never, if he heard this album, he would have just lost it.
Yeah. I wasn't allowed to watch like certain movies, like if the priest gave like the homily or whatever, and he'd take it upon himself to be like, you can't show him the Golden Compass or what's the Tom Hanks movie?
God,
Terminal,
the Da Vinci Code,
big,
yeah, it's big.
Man with one red shoe.
Yeah,
don't let your kids watch Philadelphia.
Don't watch the later seasons of Happy Days where Tom Hanks gets
bruised and battered. I was still what I am.
Dylan.
Yes.
Why are we talking about Ghost this week, bud? I mean, I'm excited, but I am intrigued.
You and I had a conversation many years ago talking about, there seemed to be all these great Swedish adjacent bands that were showing up. In Solitude, Tribulation, Watain. I think one of the first things we really bonded over was Watain's The Wild Hunt. And then the first Ghost record always was kind of being tossed around there as a great representation of 60s and 70s hard rock and roll kind of blending together into this great kind of hidden gem of a record, right? This band is interesting. They're kind of an anomaly, right? They started out with this very kind of roots heavy metal record, a classic rock record, and they've taken over the fucking world, essentially. Probably as close to like a modern day arena heavy band that you're going to get.
I almost saw them in an arena once. I almost saw them at Bridgestone open for Iron Maiden, but we got there too late. They made them start like way too early. Yeah.
But the reason we're talking about this record is, one, it's a great record. It's probably the purest the band's ever been, I think. It's almost borderline a demo with how it sounds. It's kind of an anomaly.
Sounds great for a demo, though.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. The band went on to be what it is, kind of an arena rock band. There's still a lot of the early sounds and where they're at today, but I really wanted to dig into where this band started. This album kind of hit out of nowhere for me. Really helped usher me getting into a lot of bands that sounded like this, or maybe some of the doom bands, some of the stoner bands that I went on to further get into. And, it just seemed like a breath of fresh air. I was listening to a lot of death metal and technical death metal at the time, and this was just like a palate cleanser.
Just at the time.
Just at the time.
Since then, you've kind of chilled on the death metal and technical death, right?
Yeah, I've relapsed completely. I have. It's a constant battle. Every single time I'm like, I got out, and they go me back in.
My first even introduction to this band came after this record. Not long after it. It was their first music video and the first single that came after for their sophomore record, and then I believe it also ended up on the Covers record. But Secular Haze.
Yeah.
That was on there. Yeah, it was on the second record, and then ended up as just another song on the Covers record. But it was their first music video, and seeing that band come out on like the 60s, like 70s kind of variety show soundstage with like all the grain and the aspect ratio and everything. And it's like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this before. This is crazy. And it had to have been right before I moved back to Bowling Green. But so it was like kind of getting more familiar with that band, and also us kind of becoming good friends, and especially getting into this, you know, a lot of these forms of music. So just, again, hit me at the right time.
Yep.
Young, impressionable, stupid. So
yeah, that's that had to be right before the second record came out, right? And Infesticism, I think it's what it's called. Yeah, that probably would have been on the, if you have Ghost EP, the Rocky Erickson cover.
Yep.
And the ABBA cover.
ABBA.
That's got a great, that sleeve to that thing is great. I mean, it's the Nosferatu. Yep.
Yeah.
Swindle.
I've not really ever listened. I listened to this album once within the past couple years, like on my own, but I've never really dove into Ghost's existence. Do ghosts exist?
I've never seen one.
So we're going to start from the beginning. With a band like this, where do you think it all begins? Where does it start? How does it start? How is the sketty made?
One strand at a time.
One strand at a time. So it starts out in Sweden, right? Tobias Forge, who may or may not be associated with the band somehow. It seems to be a long line of Catholic priests and popes and cardinals. And Tobias just seems to be kind of a contact guy with all of that group.
He's a Peter Parker to all these Spider-Men.
Tobias Forge, a young, impressionable man with an older brother with records.
Story as old as time.
And what record do you think he received, especially being in the band that he's in? What band could have influenced the type of imagery that Ghost would have?
Well, certainly one of them. Maybe my favorite record, Love Gun, 77. What a record. But I love the quote when I read this article where it said his older brother, Sebastian, who was like, good like 10, 13 years older than him, was like, I think you like this more than I do, so you can have it. Which, yeah, I mean, if you look at the band, obviously there is going to be a theatrical and kind of like, whether or not you like Kiss, there are definitely some kind of simple pop structures that I think you could build off of and, certainly run with. This band is a lot crazier with its songwriting, I think, but I could see where that you could draw the line, at least, both thematically and musically.
Image wise too, I think there's a big aspect of that. It's hard not to look at the bombastic nature of maybe what the band is now, even in its early days and its forming days of what it looked like. Obviously, like, has an older brother, introduces him to heavier bands, hard rock, etc. But his father was also a musician at this point, which is kind of interesting to read. Tobias never really had any other ambition to do anything other than be a musician. And it's like, oh, okay, you lived in a supportive household. Oh, I see how that works. Huh. Support your kids' dreams and let them do things that they want to do, and they might actually have a happy life or something.
I don't know if I'd let my child drop out at 16.
Out of high school.
Yeah.
Right.
But
hey man, it's Sweden. It's different there.
Do they got a GED too? I don't know.
I'm it's called IKEA.
Yeah, all right. That's, I mean, hey, more power to you. I'm glad it worked out, because it would have been a long road, and it seemed like it might have been
a long road.
It is a long road.
At least another 15 years, we know from the notes.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, over the next decade or so, he was involved in several bands across a variety of different subgenres as well. I mean, indie rock, alt rock, even being in kind of like a hair metal band. And then probably the band that came up the most was Repugnant, which is a death metal band, which seemed to be at least generate some sort of kind of buzz in the local scene, perhaps. I'm not like super familiar with this band, but I think they kind of get recognized with, being
Some of the Heschers.
right. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not extremely familiar with the band. I believe I listened to their full length once it was starting to circulate during the media fire years.
Gotcha.
Being able to find any and everything for free. But some of Tobias's earliest influences were, kind of bleed into what he's currently doing with Ghost. You've got Merciful Fate, you've got the Misfits, Blue Oyster Cult, just to name a few. And, now looking back, I never would have pinpointed the Misfits, but it makes complete sense with some of the music and some of the imagery, some of the subject matter, right? I mean, that just screams like Halloween. It screams, Static Age, everything. But Repugnant, as you mentioned, Swedish death metal band. I mean, aside from it being just a Swedish death metal band based off of where they were located, definitely had some influences from the early 90s Swedish scene, Entombed, Dismember, a lot of old school death metal in there. That band was around for about 6 years or so. And it seems like during this period of time, Tobias kind of had an epiphany and was like, I'm getting older here. I haven't really had a ton of success with all of this. Could happen. It may not happen, but if it needs to happen, it's got to happen now. It's got to happen soon. And it was almost time to just like, okay, what's the plan of action? What can I do to continue pursuing this thing I've wanted to do since I was a child, but also have something in mind that is going to be palatable without me, selling out on my beliefs, without me selling out on just playing something for the sake of playing it. He's married, he's got 2 kids, he's got a family to support. That's not a really good position to be in when you're just digging into the world of playing heavy adjacent music and knowing what you have to go through to do this.
Being in a Swedish death metal band named Repugnant might not be the most lucrative career that you can imagine.
Yeah, just kind of doing the research on this. It's one of those classic things where you are working in some random job, maybe something that you don't particularly like. I think he worked for like a telephone or a computer company, didn't know shit about it, just kind of fake it till you make it. And then also at the same time, he's doing a lot of these projects. He's, working in Repugnant, but he's also kind of got this idea for this new project that at the time was kind of like, this is an idea I have. I've grown up with these certain influences, but he's like, I read he'd be working at his job, the computer job, and like just drawing out some of the logos and the imageries and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, we kind of mentioned, Ghost being heavily influenced by Merciful Fate, the Misfits, Blue Oyster Cult. And so I think while in Repugnant, he's like maybe forming some ideas as far as like what that could potentially look like. And so I believe these songs were kind of written through 2006, 2008 era. Some of the dates were a little fuzzy, but at least we know in March 2008, Tobias kind of takes his friend and Repugnant member, Gustav Lindstrom, to record 3 songs for a demo. You have Prime Mover, Death Knell, and Stand By Him, which Tobias also stated was kind of where the band began. I think he even said like when he came up with the riff, like initially, that was like all he could think about. He dreamt about it. Anytime he picked up a guitar, that was like over and over again. We've like all been there. If there's like something that excites you and you just kind of want to figure it out, you're kind of like the cogs are moving. How do I flesh this song out? How do I do it? So that was kind of like the moment where it's like, okay, I think I'm onto something here. I think this could be a thing.
The notes say that like the Repugnant album didn't come out until like after they broke up, right?
Yeah, and what's weird about this too is that I couldn't tell because some of the details again are a little bit fuzzy. There were some sites that said that Repugnant stopped in 2004. Like I think Metal Archive says that the band stopped in 2004. The album came out later in 2006. But when the demo dropped, there was like some talking about like he uploaded the demo to MySpace, and then also was like at a Repugnant, like he went to Repugnant rehearsal after it. So when this band actually stopped, when
Right.
it seemed like the actual debut did come out after they were done by what I've read, but it seemed like it was kind of pretty much up until like Ghost became like a thing that took up all of his time.
Yeah.
Then that band basically stopped.
So it's funny to think about that and talk about that, because I do know that Ghost played Maryland Death Fest 2011, I think. Tobias played 2 sets that night. He played with Repugnant directly before Ghost.
See?
Like, so it's probably one of those things of, we never really broke up. It's just the band ceased, right?
Sure.
And I'm sure you hit the nail on the head. Once Ghost really started, kicking in, it was like, hey, I have to go with this. This is actually yielding the results of what I want. This is actually moving me to a area in my life where I can take care of everything, other than like, hey, I got to go back and work at a record store or a warehouse for a couple weeks, in between tours or anything. So yeah, he's starting to write stuff he's really fascinated with and really just driven about creating. It sounds like a lot of the influences, it's keeping a lot of the imagery that he has been a fan of since he was a child. Also still has a couple feet in the extreme metal world with the approach to it. He's obviously writing riffs. He's crafting the image of this band. One thing he didn't want to fucking do was sing.
Yeah.
And somehow, he ended up in that position. Some of the vocalists that Tobias had in mind and wanted for this project were Messiah Marcolin of Candlemass, JB of Gren Magus, Matt Slavon of Yngwie Malmsteen fame. So like some fellow musicians that were into the same style and in the same circles. I can definitely hear the Candlemass influence for sure on this record. Gren Magus as well. I don't hear any Yngwie, but I mean, I'm sure vocal prowess is there.
Yeah, vocally, it's like definitely big, I guess, is how I would say it. Soaring. Those power metal or those kind of like, shredders, I feel like, especially Yngwie, if you heard like, I don't know, I had Trilogy growing up, so a lot of it is kind of soaring and, very theatrical as well. So I could see some crossover.
None of those guys wanted the job, so when in doubt, you got to fucking do it. You're talking about seeing Megadeth. It's like Dave didn't want to be a vocalist. He's like, fuck it, I'll do it.
Yep.
Right? Got to step into it. Tobias obviously came up with, so he's got the songs, comes up with the imagery of the band. He wanted the band to be fronted by this being, this ghoulish figure of sorts, this, his version of, what is it? Is it a witch? Is it a warlock? Is it a wizard? What is it, Swindle? What is it?
I did want to interject and say that it probably is a good thing that he ended up being the person that did the vocals, because I'm sure if like the person that did vocals for Yngwie Malmsteen ended up joining the band, he might not have gone as far deep into like the imagery that old dude wanted to use. So probably helped him out for the better.
But also it's like you're writing all the shit,
Yeah.
It's your band.
You're kind of just, you might as well, what you want to hear. And, maybe not always, maybe not everyone is able to replicate what is in their head, but it sounds like, we're going to get into it later. It would be unreal to hear this record sung by like anybody else, honestly.
A satanic anti-pope himself. Papa
Emeritus.
Like one of those hotels. Embassy suites,
Got him.
Obviously inspired by King Diamond, Kiss. You could name a couple other bands there. Blue Oyster Cult always gets brought up. Merciful Fate, the whole nine. It's a very striking image when you see them. There's some live footage of the very first show the band played, and it shows them like full regale, just like going on stage. He's in the robe, he's got the mask on, and you audibly hear some dude go, fucking whoa, what is that thing? Like first show, they walk in, like just I could hear some like straggly haired Hesher just go, fucking what? as this thing comes. It's all drenched in red, so like it's a very striking image. And one of the earliest promo shots of the band, it's not even a band behind them. It's just a bunch of fill-in guys in the ghoul get-ups, and obviously Tobias in the Pope setup. And it's just like makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you've got the imagery before the band's even really doing anything, which is pretty. You got to be driven to have that kind of shit and to be able to do anything like that.
Yeah, one other thing that I thought was kind of neat as well, that completely makes sense. You know, we've been talking about a lot of these like, you know, rock influences that are very clearly there, but you know, I guess Tobias was also getting like dragged to the opera as a kid too with his mom. So he was just like always kind of in that world, very aware of like what a stage presence looked like. And you know, when we actually did see this band together.
Yep.
On tour for the third record.
Mhm.
And it was at the Marathon in Nashville. And it is very, it's such a, I don't know, like it's hard to explain. We were kind of closer up to the stage. Yeah, it was incredible. There's definitely just such a vibe with it, and everybody's involved. And you know, they actually did like one of our good friends, I think, even tried to sign up to be one of the nuns, like putting out like communion or whatever. So yeah, it's such a cool live band to see, but also on record, very, very great as well.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's very much like a Hugh Jackman getting ready for Wolverine thing, right? The stage got Hugh Jackman ready to don the suit in Wolverine. So like it obviously gets Tobias ready to like don the cloak, don the rosary, the whole nine, you know? Or here's your communion wafer, blah, blah, blah. You know, that whole thing. You know, I was really hoping to have the big hat before we started this episode out.
Did you order one? Like the mask on the Slipknot episode?
No, I literally was going to get a piece of cardboard out in the garage and just tape it in a circle and put it on my head.
I can't tell if we're still in the Hugh Jackman thing or not with The Greatest Showman or not. Is that a thing? Is that the joke? What is the thing?
He'll catch up. We're good.
Oh man.
Let the boy watch.
P.T. Barnum wasn't a good man. He didn't sing.
Hey man, I saw Freaks. I know what happens. But anyway, you know, he knew the vision was going to cost money to put all this shit together. He knew to have all the things that he needed for this project, you got to have fucking capital, right? You got to be able to invest money into something like this for it to look good. This is definitely not the type of project where you can go, we're going to punk rock it. We're going to do it, because the last thing you want is your first show just to look like, hey, we bought all of our makeup from like, you know, the fucking convenience store. And we're putting it together. The tent, Spirit Halloween.
Yeah,
some of that stuff, I'll say, probably pretty good quality at this point. Cosplayers have helped set that shit up pretty well. But yeah, as Austin mentioned earlier, he was working at like a call center for a while, which, as you said, sketching everything out while at work, not paying any bit of attention. I mean, I'm sure some of us have done that shit too, where it's like, oh, I've got this riff idea. Yeah, sure, buddy. Yep, your phone's off. Yada, yada, yada. All right.
Hold, please.
You do all that. Hold, please. He gets a little bit of attention by uploading the songs to MySpace, and he draws the attention of one person in particular, which we will touch on quite a bit in this episode, which is Fenris from Darkthrone.
Early fan. Guy must have been
holy
scouring
shit.
the internet, finding stuff. I mean, being like, you know, in the area, I'm sure. I mean, the guy is just like obviously an underground legend in his own right, but fan of music, you're just going to be scouring the internet. And yeah, the days of MySpace where you could just upload your demo and, you know, anyone could potentially hear it. And sometimes that person is the drummer of Darkthrone, and he kind of gets you set up pretty early on with a label, Rise Above Records.
Owned and ran by Lee Dorian of Cathedral and Napalm Death fame.
What's that?
You know,
what's that name? I don't know. I've never heard.
Where would that have come from?
No idea. No clue.
Man, crazy stuff.
Where would that come from?
But yeah.
Yeah, Rise Above Records, bit of a trad metal, stoner metal, doom metal label of sorts, and Fenris, knocked elbows with his buddy Lee. He's like, hey, you got to sign this band. It's going to be the biggest fucking thing Going to be the biggest fucking thing ever. But not to say the band hadn't released anything yet. Obviously, they had the MySpace demos that went up. It seems like they released some cassette tapes of this as well. Did you see the photo and Discogs of that cassette tape? That is tremendous.
It's something else. Yeah. I mean, the logo's there, but it is an
literally
interesting
just
version
like,
of. It kind of looks
a stick figure.
Kind of looks like a gingerbread man version of like.
It's great.
Yeah. They also, so basically they do, these 3 songs, right? Prime Mover, Death Knell, Stand By Him. They did re-record Death Knell, and then they also had Elizabeth, which would end up on the debut as well. They did like a 7-inch for like kind of an underground German label called Iron Pegasus Records. But the demo, from what I understand, is where Fenriz was like, "Oh, this is great." Dylan linked an article with maybe like a horror website or something like that that I read, where he was like, "Oh, what have you been listening right now?" And then he was like, "Oh, this is the hottest band right now. Got to check out that demo." I think and he talks about the songs that they did re-record for that label, but yeah. And he even says, I think, and they're working on an album out on Rise Above Records. So it was quick. That was a quick turnaround for sure. So
that was a very PR answer.
Yeah.
From
yes,
Fenris.
right.
It's like, yes, I've been listening to Swedish's hot and new and upcoming band, Ghost.
Hey man, I'll say this, that dude's a character. Every interview I've ever seen of him, he's very much like a radio voice right into it. He used to like DJ at different bars and stuff like that, obviously play like a bunch of like old school heavy metal stuff. But he used to do like a mixed, what is it? Like when blog spots and stuff were really popular, he'd release like a different playlist, and it seemed like he'd do it weekly. And there'd just be tons of shit on there. I mean, there'd be dance music, there'd be like old school black metal bands on there, all sorts of stuff. So like, he's a big music fan as well.
It would be weird if 2 people in the show used to do that.
So here ties it back to Austin being a postman. Fenris worked for the Postal Service for years.
God damn. Well, got to get those benefits. Well, postman, music lover, shows Lee Dorian this demo. And I think there was a quote that said, "I started playing the demo on Friday, and by Sunday, I must have listened to it like 30 times. It didn't sound like anything else. It was poppy, satanic. It was totally its own." And then through that, loved the demo so much that, within the week, he apparently signed Ghost to like a contract, maybe a 3-album deal, and paid for Tobias to go into a basement studio in Sweden to record the debut record.
So there's a great story, speaking of being paid to like go into the studio. I think there were some promo shots that were going to be made for the album, and Tobias kept hitting Lee up like, "I need more money to get this robe. I need more money to get this robe." And Lee's like, "You haven't even released any music yet, man. Like, what are we doing?" And then like the photo gets taken, and Lee was like, "Okay." Like,
he didn't know what they looked like at all. Like, he had no idea. He just like signed them to a deal and like whatever.
This is
like,
2009.
Right. Yeah. So
this isn't like 92. This isn't 86, where it would be hard to see what these guys looked like. This is 2009.
Right. And this is exactly what you said before. The shot was like taken in a living room of a friend. And yeah, it wasn't, obviously this was, Tobias's band. So he didn't like have anybody in the group. This is just like a bunch of people they kind of knew. I think only one person perhaps in the photo ended up being in the band later, but these were all just like randos.
It's funny that there probably was an invoice for the photo shoot.
Yeah.
It's like $5,000 photo shoot, and like $4,950 of it went to the robe, and like the other $50 went to the people acting like they were in the band Ghost.
Yeah.
The invoice has the Rise Above Records watermark on it.
God.
Like, I see it coming out of an old printer that has the pull tabs on the side of the paper, just scanning through there, like, and just Lee just going, "What have I done? What have I fucking done? I have bankrupted this fucking label with this band that I know nothing of." And then he sees the photo and has the great audible fuck because of the photo. It's like, all right, again, this is this is very there's a lot of startup businesses that'll screw people out of money and have existed on this planet for a long time. And as a biased or as a jaded human being, as much as I am, I would read this and go, so we're getting fucking worked.
Catfished.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting, this one just proved to work out really well. So we know the recording lineup of this for this album is very much Tobias helming most of, if not 95% of this. His friend Gustav Lidstrom is playing bass on it. Ludwig Kingberg is playing drums. God, they're Gunther. I feel like we're saying wrestling names at this point.
But you say all those names, but they're all uncredited. You have the record, and it just says,
I have it.
Ghost.
It just says all performed by Ghost or Ghoul Rider on there. You know, it's very much, he's going in. Like, he's going full bore into this whole imagery of, and I'll say, at that time when I discovered the band, you could find nothing. You couldn't find shit on this band. Like, even the research for this, it's like Ghost prior to, 2012. Nothing. Like, very few live shows at that point. Photos were very hit and miss. Decibel did a really great interview with Ghost, I think, around that same time frame. And it's like that might have been the biggest thing they'd done at that point, interview-wise. And even then, everything was still done from the character perspective. It wasn't like, oh, we interviewed Tobias Forge. It was, no, we interviewed the Pope, Papa
Emeritus.
And that thing. And as you said, like, the liner notes in the album are very bare. It's almost like you found this, it's like you dug up this weird fucking album out of the ground, right? It's almost like the kids finding the Jumanji board game.
Like the dustiest section of the record store, and it's, it sounds like it too. But I mean, going from, basically an unknown group of people, you also have like some fake ass names, which again is very Tobias. Gene Walker, helms the production, but from what I understand, this is also a fake name by Tobias. It seems like he did all the recording and the production for this record in Manfire Recordings and White Light Studio. But again, I don't even know if these are real, like, studio names. Like I think I said before, it's like a basement studio, but maybe they kind of church it up a little bit to just sound like, yeah, this is some established studio in like Sweden or wherever. In the countryside, perhaps, but yeah, it's there.
They put a rug down. They put like just a little area rug down. They're like, there we go.
The only money that Rise Above Records put into this is for that robe. Like, they didn't even really have to pay for him to go to a studio and pay for a fucking producer or an engineer. Tobias did all the shit in his basement.
Right, and I'm sure Tobias a lot of the recording and musicians and different things that were done for this record were all done through like, hey, I know somebody, like someone, I've got all these connections I've made throughout the years of working Sweden. And it seems like Sweden has a shitload of musicians in it, a ton. So he's able to find these connections. He did get an actual person to mix and master it. It wasn't just mixed and mastered by Tobias. It was done by Jamie Gomez Ariano, who has worked with Angel Witch and Ulver, who has put out some Ulver is a pretty experimental black metal band that's done like, as far as like techno, electronic music, as well as some of the most like abrasive sounding early black metal records. So he went with people that had done, he went with someone that had done work on bands he was into, right? Angel Witch, I could see, I may not necessarily care for that band, but there's a lot of influence into this record as well.
Listen to that debut, it's rad.
Yeah, it's mastered pretty well. I mean, this record sounds great. For what it is, it sounds great. I'm just going to gloss right over that one.
Yeah, that was the thing you did.
As a lot of people should. Even the gear used on this record is pretty like basic. It's a Gibson SG, an orange Thunderbird 50, and I believe they dial the gain just low enough to where it's almost losing the breakup, just so they could like get a little bit more oomph to it, make it sound a little older, give it that real 60s and 70s kind of vibe to it. Like, you've still got some of the sustain and the tonality from the distortion. I mean, if you listen to it, it very much sounds like a tube amp that's just turned on. Like it just sounds like the gain is right at the bottom of it. And I mean, we'll get into kind of the recording process of this as we go through. The artwork, which is one of my favorite things about this record. It's a very striking image. It's an homage paid to Salem's Lot, the miniseries that came out in '79. I mean, it's the Pope looming over this fucking it's at a house. Actually, hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Pope just looming over this almost castle-esque building.
Right. And I'll say, I may not have even known about Salem's Lot until I saw that cover, to be honest with you. I mean, I consider myself a person who watches a lot of movies, but I don't think I had even known about the source material. And someone was like, oh, no, that's like based on a movie. And, you know, they've clearly done this several times since. I mean, I mentioned Amadeus earlier from '84, Nosferatu in 22, but, you know, even some of the stuff like I've seen, you know, their third album kind of takes from like Art Deco from the 20s and 30s and Metropolis. I know on some of the singles they've done shit for like King Kong and like a couple other things that are just really cool pieces of art.
There's a great shirt design, and it's the stuff. It's Papa with like stuff coming out of his face. I'm like, oh, that's fucking perfect. I had a shirt in which I'm bummed that I fucking lost it. But it was the Clockwork Orange.
You may have given that to me.
So you might have that.
I might.
The VHS cover, and it's Papa,
Yeah.
right? Like they've got a really great tie-in with horror, and I really like that a lot. It's a lot of classic horror. But what's funny about all this is, again, it's done by an artist that may or may not exist. It could be Tobias himself. We don't really know.
Yeah, there was a great, I don't know if it was a Reddit thread where he had done a bunch of artwork for like either the bands that he was in or for other bands, like logos and just some doodles. So like, I don't know if this was him. It very well could have been. This is the only credit that I have seen by this, you know, name, but it's I don't know for sure. I couldn't really figure out that answer specifically. But talking about Watain from earlier, Eric Danielson from Watain is credited under like Trident Arts as the designer. So I'm assuming like just the way the layout is and everything like that. But yeah, I think he's done work for a lot of different bands in that field. But very cool.
I mean, it's really tying it all in with that Scandinavian area, right? You know, all the different tie-ins that the band has and the history with like, I'm sure Eric Danielson seems like one of the guys that probably is a tape collector or has collected some of those old Repugnant demos or anything like that. So do we want to get into the track list of this? We've got all this background on the record. Let's dig right in.
I'm good. I think I got
Well, it's been good. That's the end of the episode. Now we're doing recommendations. Dylan, what have you been listening to?
a lot of this Ghost record for sure.
A lot of this Ghost record. So, obviously I'm more familiar with this record than probably you guys are. But I want to hear from the one who's probably never really listened to this, other than maybe one time, is Swindle. What did you think of the instrumental track or the opening instrumental, DEUS CULPA?
I want to see Vincent Price playing this shit. I want to see Dr. Phibes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking church organs just surrounded by. I want to see a vampire that looks like Dylan skulking on a ship.
I felt like I was sitting in a church pew growing up.
Yep.
Just like, there's an hour of my life we're about to try to get through. Like people are, but it is, you know, a lot of this record feels like it, because it really just is. It's a concept record for the most part. For all intents and purposes, it is a concept record. And it feels like we are kind of being drawn into the congregation. We are entering, you know, the church service for this, you know, fucking very satanic kind of cult-like organization.
You know, when I listened to this today, you know, to take some final notes for it, and the immediate image that came to me is Reverend Lovejoy sitting everybody down in the pews, And now an excerpt from Iron Butterfly in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
And just that poor woman just sitting at that organ playing that extended
17
solo
minutes.
for 17 minutes.
Don't you know that I love you, honey?
And then as it pans out from the church, it says next week Testament.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But no, absolutely.
One thing that I thought was very interesting about this track as well is it is the lone song from this album that is not written by Tobias, mainly because it's an old Swedish like Christmas hymn. Like it's an old church hymn that they just put in reverse. The Latin title of this is DEUS CULPA. I don't know how to pronounce Latin, but what it translates is like God blame or God's fault. But the original Swedish hymn is it's called Shine Over the Sea and Shore, and I guess this was like from an old Swedish novel and like a poem that eventually got adapted into like a song. And so this is something you might hear at like church service at Christmas time or something like that.
Even when I first heard this record, I somehow knew it was a reverse thing. Like I could just hear, and at the tail end of it, you can almost hear like either a needle hitting a record or a tape being flipped or something. Like it starts to hiss a little bit as it kicks into really the first track on the record, Con CLAVI Con DEUS.
Sure.
You know, I'm not Mike Patton. I mean,
I have had that. I have never known exactly what it was saying, but that like melody, ever since I've like listened to this record, like as a young man,
yep.
I could be like washing the dishes and I'm like, very operatic, that kind of opera influence. So it's the three tenors. Bring out the clown.
It's fucking Pavarotti.
Yeah.
It's not only do you get the Latin influence to it with the song title, you get the great lyrics to it, but you get this great fucking bass riff, and the way this thing is produced, you hear every single instrument. There's very, very few overdubs. There's overdubs on the record, but it's not dense. Like it's not 4 guitar tracks on each side. Like there might be 2, but it's usually just stereo left, stereo right. And what's great about this record is I think you guys probably listened to it like I did with a pair of CAN headphones, right? Every so often I'd pop one over and you'd only hear like one guitar, which I think is so fucking cool. So to hear the whole piece, it's like you got to have the full headset on. There's not stuff recorded down the middle. And it's each guitar part on here, the guitars are basically playing the same part, but one might be playing a lower register, one may be playing a higher register. It's very thought out. And the fact that like Tobias is like, oh, it needs to sound like this thing where it's just in key, right? Everything's just in key. The notes make sense. And I guess the big point of this is, like you mentioned, the melody, the vocals on this. If you're used to this form of heavy music, doom, stoner, whatever you want to name it, you kind of get these weird, they're not necessarily out of tune, but this weird kind of off key kind of wail to it. And a lot of these vocals almost seem monotone at a point. Like it almost seems like he's speaking the entire, he speaks singing or something. And it sounds good. It doesn't matter. Colin from, Twitching Tongues very much does that similar thing, right? Where it is, exactly. It's the Candlemass thing. It's the doom metal thing. And it's just so fitting to this track. And not only is it, you've got the tongue-in-cheek aspect, you've got the imagery, you've got great fucking riffs all over this track and the rest of them. And just the lyrics on this album, as you said, are very much a loose concept. You're basically sitting in on a ritual to basically praise Satan, right? The lyric line on here, "Oh, you rebel chief, destroyer of the earth," which starts out a melody. These guys really, really like Beelzebub. They really like him a lot, or maybe they don't. Maybe it's all Marx Brothers. Ha cha 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 cha.
I told y'all in the group chat, the riff like 2 minutes in, the little like That reminded me of Tool for like 1 second, until they like change chords. Yeah,
they modulate. It's done. It's over with.
Right.
The minute there's a change.
Yeah.
If they had kept going with it in like the same kind of monotonous tone, it would have definitely reminded me of Tool. It may honestly have something to do with the fact that it's in like 12/8 or whatever.
It swings.
Yeah, I think it's a good representation of like, I mean, this is literally the first song you're hearing on the record, so it kind of mixes everything very well, not only musically, but you're also being introduced to the kind of themes of the band itself. Like you're being introduced into the world of in which the band exists. They're like this kind of they're preachers, or they're like this, congregation, cardinals, anti-pope, or the Antichrist. Like they're spreading the word, like it's coming back. The evil one's coming back into the world. But it's a great first song. You get riffs. You also get these kind of, I don't know if like the way the band, and we'll talk about this a lot on this record because every song kind of has this part, but you have these kind of like really great evil sounding like verses, and then the big kind of like poppy like major choruses that are just so incredible.
What really hits me on this track too is it's one riff. It really is one riff. It's just a variation of that one riff, which has gone to many things we've talked about where you really can just get away with writing one really good riff and you could structure everything around it. It's dynamics. It's, cutting it in half or pulling a little bit out of it, dropping the guitars out, anything like that. And to kind of go back with what we're looking at, they're almost like druids, right? It's druids supporting the Pope. It's very much like Undertaker's entrance at WrestleMania 14. All the fire's up, he's walking through the tunnel kind of thing. I don't want to gloss over it because there's solos on this record, but they're done in a way that they're hyper melodic solos, right? They really play another melody. And, it's this song kind of ends on that. It's just really cool. It's a really well done opening track to a record.
He said in one of the quotes, like before, when he was like talking about, I just wanted to be the guitar player, not so much the vocalist. He, mentioned guys that I think mirror that memorable kind of singable solo thing very well. Like he mentioned, grew up loving, or maybe not grew up loving, but he loves Slash, and he like loves Keith Richards, and those types of guys I think were very like prone to write kind of memorable hooky parts. So it's no surprise that also translated into this record as far as like the solos are concerned, because they stick out, but they're not like wank.
And to talk about memorable solos, like the solo that I always remember from this record is from the next track. Like I can hum it note for note. I can hear it in my head. Ritual, which is to me, like this song has the riff on the record. There's some really great riffs on this record, but this is the one for me. I don't know why this track sticks out to me so much. It might even be the one track the band still really plays live from this era. But Ritual, great opening with the intricate kind of guitar chords being played. One guitar is playing the chords, one guitar is playing like a melodic line, and you've got the bass doing these great kind of counter melody notes that are just playing through to tie it all together. And then it kicks right into, in my notes, I put the riff. It's like, that is
kind of like a chromatic type of thing.
Yeah.
The first half of the riff reminds me of Symphony of Destruction.
Yeah.
Because it's
okay.
Maybe just because I'm just freshly off a Megadeth concert. I also thought that as well.
There also was a riff that, so it doesn't sound like this, but it reminded me of the chorus to the song Aneurysm by Nirvana. Not that it sounds like the chorus to Aneurysm, but because they're they're just hitting notes on the way to the note that they want to get to. It's like kind of passing notes, but kind of not really. Like the riff is like moving up, and they're just like hitting notes from like point A to point B in between where they're trying to go, and it reminded me of that aneurysm riff.
Is that the riff that's about 2 minutes into the song?
Yep.
So I put that's almost like a Metallica riff, like kind of a 90s Metallica riff. I heard that, was like, oh shit, that sounds like Black Album era Metallica or something. So I could 100% on that. Again, we talk about the big pop choruses on this album. Like, I mean, shit, 50, less than a minute in, you got your first chorus on this track. And it's a big one. There's you've got a big chorus on this. You have this great spoken word part in the middle that's like very much, it makes me think of Doug Bradley from Hellraiser, like Pinhead. Oh, don't waste those tears, or just something like that. Like immediately I was like, fuck, did Doug get on this record? He's done stuff with Cradle of Filth, so like it would make sense. Oh yeah.
I mentioned this earlier, but it's so funny to think that he didn't either. He just didn't want to or feel comfortable or whatever the reasoning was. It's these types of choruses with all these kind of layered, vocal harmonies and stuff like that. Those like the BOC kind of choruses. He did it perfectly. So I don't know if it was, maybe he just didn't want to be up front, the front man. He plays it very well. He has played it well for a very long time at this point. But yeah, this is pretty incredible for your like first proper, full length record.
I mean, there's tracks on this record where I heard probably 4 to 5 different vocal harmonies just on top. And it's like, he tracked them all. It's not like, oh, let's run it through Pro Tools. It's like, it's pretty well been tracked by him because they're all different sounding. And some of them are probably a little pitchy here or there, which just adds to the character of this record. As Swindle said, they're mispronouncing the song title.
It's Elizabeth. Does he know that not Elizabeth?
I'm coming.
Elizabeth isn't how you say that name.
This might be my favorite riff on the record.
This is a rad song. It starts out very menacing sounding.
Yeah, and it's like kind of like you mentioned before with Ritual, where it's basically the same riff. Maybe like there's couple different things, but for the most part, it's variations on the same riff throughout the entire song. So if you got a good riff, you don't necessarily have to write something else. As a wise man once said in a review, streaming now on YouTube, Wormwitch, check it out. But this riff to me feels very Merciful Fate in nature.
Oh yeah,
both vocally and musically, even the soloing too as well. Like I would say, this is just basically like their version of a Merciful Fate track.
Yeah, 100%. That opening riff, that first big riff you hear, right? The kind of the meat and potatoes riff. Obviously I did a Crypt Sermon review, and it's like I heard that and I went, oh fuck it, yeah, absolutely. Like it's all over that. The disco drums coming in after that part.
There's a couple of those throughout this record.
That's some ABBA shit.
These 3 songs in a row, Elizabeth, Stand By Him, and I think Satan's Prayer, like all the drums on all 3 of those songs are just like dance drums all the way through. I think the next song, maybe it's Stand By Him, has that constant bass drum on like the quarter note for the whole fucking song.
Does the Andrew WK thing, the I Get Wet thing, just on the 2 the entire time to where it gives you anxiety. It's fucking maddening and great at the same time. I really enjoy how heavy this track is, met with these big soaring choruses. Like it's like good cop, bad cop kind of thing, right? The keyboards are really noticeable in this track. Right as the chorus kicks in, there's this like 5-note kind of melody that gets played on the keyboards, and I think it's a Moog. It's got to be a Moog synth or something.
It feels very much like a modular kind of synth. I'm sure if you're into this style of music, if you're taking from those influences, I'm sure that's going to come up. BOC. Yeah, I mean, what are we doing?
Mort Plant Man. He's in that fucking occult shit too.
He's a nameless ghoul. Mort Garson. You heard it here first.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. But I will say, we kind of touched about it in the beginning, but underneath all of these kind of elements in songwriting and the structures, there is like some level of that organ or the synth that is being played, just kind of, carrying through to provide a little bit more atmosphere. And yeah, I would agree. I think it definitely comes through on, Elizabeth. One of many songs about Elizabeth Bathory in the history of heavy metal. I mean, the one that always comes to mind for me is Venom. They did a song called Countess Bathory from black metal, but I mean, a million other bands have also done it.
We obviously got to see Cradle of Filth a handful of years ago in Chicago. They were touring their classic album, which was written about Elizabeth Bathory. They toured that record. I have the shirt somewhere around here. I mean, it's a subject matter that doesn't get used a ton, so it's not overdone. So when you hear it, but this is probably the most melodic track ever written about this subject. And it's debatable if this person actually did all this stuff. It's kind of like the legacy of Vlad Tepes. Did he do all those things? Was he, was he a bloodsucker? Was he all these things? The story about Elizabeth Bathory is that she would bathe in the blood of virgins to help, keep her youthful, which it's like, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Some people like to put bat shit on their face with makeup, you just got to bathe and kill a couple people, like that sort of thing. So great subject matter.
Y'all might be surprised to learn that the band Bathory is actually named after.
I hate you.
What a dickhead.
I hate you.
Like, I didn't even know that until we started doing research for this episode.
What a dickhead.
What a dickhead.
Great song. One of the kind of, I would say, original few tracks they really kind of worked on and recorded. But as we mentioned earlier, the track that kind of really sent Tobias down this rabbit hole and pursuing Ghost as a project, Stand By Him. I think, again, another contender for one of my favorite riffs on the record.
My favorite chorus on the record.
Also very good. Again, that kind of Dark Delight thing is very, very done well.
The riff that you're talking about sounds like Pentagram to me.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, I could see
sounds like Pentagram, arguably better than, like they had all those like weird kind of compilation releases that Relapse put out, and they put all of it out. And some of those tracks are really good, but then a lot of it's just like, okay, whatever. This does that a little bit better. This is also just, this track makes me think of Halloween 3.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Like Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great. Like, I love Season of the Witch. And it makes me think of that, like the whole chorus. It's the Night of the Witch. It's very, very danceable, as Swindle was saying. Like, it's very like danceable beats, which comes to how catchy it is, right? They've gotten a little bit more into their kind of pop sensibilities.
Yeah.
And like, there's definitely more ABBA influence. Like, I was showing my girlfriend, I think the first time I showed her the Dance Macabre video, it's like, oh yeah, that is a musical. It's a dance number. It's like, oh yeah, that's a dance track.
Yeah. Maybe on the same record, Rats, like also very,
yes.
Yeah.
So I have a gripe about Rats. I like the riff. I like the song, but the melody makes me think of the Nightman from It's Always Sunny. It's like, I hear it and I go, I am never going to unhear this.
That's funny. I'll have to check that out. Compare them. Compare down below and subscribe.
Nightman.
Click. Do the thing.
Stand By Him, driving track as well.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
it just drives, it moves.
It's kind of touching on that like Dark Delight kind of transitions that they do. I always just find this like this at this point in the record, I kind of wrote like, it's so funny to hear like these very bright and fun sounding choruses about just like
These
the most
blasphemic lyrics,
fucked up shit. I guess this is a song that quotes an old kind of like essay, like an old like German Catholic clergyman wrote an essay on witches and just awful shit, wrong shit in 1486. Heinrich Kramer. Yeah. So, which is, again, they're like digging.
Don't trust a guy named Kramer.
Don't do it.
God,
there ain't gonna be another one, Kramer.
What's the Vincent Price movie? Where he's going.
General?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like this, absolutely,
Sure.
100%. And that's one of my favorite like Vincent Price flicks.
Yeah.
Like I like I love that ending of that is fuck.
Better than the band, for sure.
That's not a false statement either.
When this, I had two notes for this before we move on to the next song. When like the beat comes in and it's got that like bass drum playing the quarter note, 4 on the floor beat, and then the riff starts, I was like, this sounds like the 80s. Just,
oh yeah,
this sounds like the whole decade of 80s rock and roll or metal or whatever.
It's the Vice City soundtrack.
Yeah, and the solo on this song is like halfway shredding.
Yeah,
a little bit.
There's this really cool arpeggio that goes right to it's like right after the first chorus that it's done. It's this very long dramatic arpeggio that I really like a lot. The organs are back on this track. Kind of adds some spooky dissonance to it towards the end of the song. Very I know Swindle has said this a lot, very Scooby-Doo. Very, very Scooby-Doo of them.
I need like just the walking music underneath this episode the whole time.
And the ending guitar melody.
So then after Stand By Him, the next track is Satan Prayer.
Chugging like palm mute intro kind of thing. This
a little bit of phaser.
Yeah, and you know what's particularly great about the guitars, and you talked about this earlier with the panning, you should listen to this record with headphones on because, and this is a very clear example of this for sure, where you have the left and right guitar doing like some shit. It almost like, I've heard bands do this a few times where it's almost kind of like like an echo almost, where it's like a call and response.
It's a ping pong effect.
Yeah, for sure. It's fantastic for sure. So do that. Bass also cutting through quite well.
The bass is fat and the verse is like, that is, I don't know what he was using. Hell, he could have been plugging straight into that same fucking orange head he was using for the guitars because it's got drive all over it.
And this is Tobias playing bass on this track as well.
I would not doubt that it's either some old Ampeg head or it's that same orange rocker verb or thunder verb, whatever it was. But like, I will say this band's always had a great bass presence on any of their records. It's always been very well mixed. I mean, if you listen to the most recent album from 2022, the bass is really high in the mix. Like you can hear it cutting through in these really great spots. And it's cool to know that you've got a guy that's like running a band and is primarily a guitar player, but he's like, I need this thing to be here. Like the guy definitely has spent a lot of his youth growing up listening to probably old soul records or like funk records or something, or just really well-produced records because he's got an ear for sound. And obviously we're talking about a track that's called Satan's Prayer that has these great sounds, and we're giving all these glowing reviews because it is a great track. The bass is great. The instrument interplay, you kind of touched on that too, of like all the instruments really fit in with each other and they play back and forth. You know, that's the benefit of like one guy doing it, is he knows what's going to work and how it fits. The second verse obviously does that thing in songwriting I really like, where the first verse is like very sparse, then the second verse is built up a little bit more, and then the next one and the next one are built up even further. There are the chorus of this has a very kind of Egyptian kind of vibe to it. Very much like a Phrygian or a harmonic minor kind of a feel to it. Just some of the note choices he's using in the vocal melody in there. The lead on this song, as soon as I heard it, I went, that's a fucking Kansas solo with all the harmonies. I was like, that's Kansas.
In going back to Ritual, I noted that chorus sounded like a Kansas chorus.
I mean, just they're just big classic rock choruses, right?
Right.
Like just, I mean, fuck, we could have said Journey or we could have said Foreigner or Boston or anything. Like it's all kind of that thing, that hyper melodic music, which we've all heard and all have internalized to come out of us at some point. I think the big notes for this is it's all over the record, but the ability to weave satanic rhetoric into these great melodies is astounding. And I would even say it's more so on this record than any of the other things the band has put out. But like you look at how he stretches out syllables or words and like to fit these melodies. I mean, when we get into Death Knell, that's got one of my favorite things in it of all time. Again, just the big hooks on this thing. You got some spooky synths at the end of it again, which are just fucking cool. I have the synths that are on this remind me of listening to, there's a CKY record called Infiltrate, Rebuild, Destroy that uses a lot of Moog on it. And it's got these great, weird kind of oscillating synths to it. I heard that and went, fuck, this has to be that same synth or something adjacent to it.
They do a good job. I really have liked a lot of their, especially when they really highlight it. I mean, we kind of talked about earlier on Stand By Him, but one of my favorite uses of synth is on the later record with the song Cerise, which they got and when they do it live, it almost seemed like it was like a keytar type of thing.
Yeah.
Incredible. It's very brief.
Yes.
But it's awesome. It's so good. So yeah, all of those kind of choices and tones very well. Death Knell? We got it.
Death Knell.
Let's get a Death Knell.
Evil sounding intro.
The Sabbath intro.
I said Sabbath Candlemas.
Yeah.
Yep.
A little rain, a little thunder.
The bass is fading in. It gets louder. It's a very subtle fade in too. It's not just like going from quiet to boom. It kind of just brings it up in the mix, and it's big sounding.
It's very fitting to start with your rhythm section for your kind of thunderous intro with the bass and the drums. But yeah, it's great. And then you have I kind of noted with the 666 parts with the little organ bits as well. Very good.
Evoke the King of Hell. It just stuck out.
Hail, Payman.
100%, 150%. The second verse is really creepy with the vocal patterns there, the way the vocals are done. It's not a whisper, but it's just quieter.
Got a little bit of reverb on it. You know? Yeah, playing the same riff, but just much lighter for sure.
I also noticed some kind of vocal things that Papa does on this track, which is there's some vibrato he kind of adds to some of his ending notes to certain phrases, and it's real subtle. You have to really listen into it, but it's there. It's just a little kind of warble that he does to add to it. There's those big bell samples, and I think the middle part of the song or the bridge that kicks in that definitely seems like the bells of Notre Dame or something.
Hell's Bell.
Or the Hell's.
I didn't know that's what this was. It essentially was they ring bells at some point in time. The death knell was the ringing of a bell immediately after a death to announce it.
Amazing.
And so it was it's the second of three bells. There's the first bell being the passing bell to warn of impending death. Then there's this bell, and then there's the lich bell or corpse bell, which survives today as the funeral toll. So,
that's great. That's like the Tim Burton movie, Corpse Bell.
Frankenweenie?
Right. Got weenies. But I will say my favorite lyric line is spelling out Satan as the melody.
They get very creative. I may have we probably glossed over a lot.
Sesame Street.
Yeah, we've glossed over a lot, but they basically have taken a lot of prayers and Christian imagery and kind of done the maybe a little bit more of a creative typo negative thing, or not typo negative, the carnivore thing with Jesus Hitler, basically just make it the opposite thing of what it is.
There's a couple pieces of merch I'll always remember from this band, but the one I remember the most is one that you had. You got it, and you may still have it. Were the candles.
Oh man, did I?
Those old
they're in
Mary fucking broke them and threw them away. Set them on fire.
They're in storage somewhere.
Well, you gave me one of the posters. I still have.
I do as well. Yeah, that's great.
So I've got that nice screen print poster
type of poster. Yeah.
But the band has done a really good job with this imagery. They've released different things. They've released Holy Water. They've released. I mean, I'll say this. I've probably got every pop of the Papa characters throughout the years, and it's just remarkable how much this band has kind of done the merchandise, but done it in a way that's still fitting to who they are.
I'm still so bummed about that show. We were supposed to get the offering plate or whatever.
Oh, man.
We somehow screwed it up. I don't know if we showed up too late or something like that, but we ended up getting the candle and the poster and stuff. But I was like, damn, where's the offering plate? I need that offering plate. Or no, maybe they ran out. Maybe that's what it was.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, I think they ran out. But either way,
It's so the funny thing about that show was that wasn't even like a tour. They were on their way to play festivals, and it was just a local opener. It was essentially an evening with a ghost, and they played for like an hour and a half, and they were just playing stuff off the first 3 records.
I mean, that's the only time I've been able to see them at this point.
Me
but
too.
Fantastic. Prime Mover.
So Prime Mover, I love this track.
A song about the nun. Get pregnant nuns.
This is the Rosemary Baby track.
Yeah.
Fucking Sydney Sweeney movie. What
I haven't seen it yet. The nun, is it called?
What's that one called?
Immaculate.
No.
Immaculate. Oh, Maleficent.
Those nun movies are terrible.
I don't know.
I'm not talking about the nun movies.
I
I'm
know you're
talking
not.
about
I know we're
the fucking Sydney Sweeney.
We're fucking with you.
The very open before like the bass comes in when it's just guitar reminds
Yes.
me of that fucking Refuse song that is
Shape of
in
Punk
the
to Come.
Bear. Yeah.
I could definitely see that, although I would never admit that in public.
Well, now you have. You have.
I think someone is going to hate me for this, but that is a new metal fucking record if I've ever heard it.
But you love new metal.
I like some new metal bands. Yes, it's
And
essentially
Refused.
Blur. It sounds. I don't like Refused. It essentially sounds like Blur meets like new metal to me. I was expecting like them to go woohoo, like it's like okay,
damn.
I got my head like
so many hot takes in this episode.
That is Weezer. That's a completely different. Oh, that's okay. You are singing that Blur song.
Song number 2. It's about pooping.
The open of the song sounds like the Refuse song. B, when the bass does come in and it's kind of just the bass alone for a second, right? I felt like they kept writing for the Conclavia or Conclavi Condio song and used part of that for this song because it's definitely the same time signature and it's like kind of the same it's in 12/8, but it sounds like it's the same pace and like it's a very similar like riff too. But yeah, it seems like what y'all were talking about with a different song, whereas like why if you got one good riff, why write other shit like that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I could definitely see that. Like the bass playing's a little melodic as it kicks in. It's just like one note at first, right? It's just one note played repeatedly, and then when the bass actually kicks in, yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that, and maybe there's reasoning behind that to make it feel like here's the beginning of the record, the end of the record ends on the same pace because it is this whole like we're presenting to you this whole sermon that we're doing, right? I could be reading far too into that, but the guy seems smart enough to be like, yeah, I want it to do this fucking thing. It has to do this. But I really like the guitars kicking in when they first come in. There's like, I think it's on the left-hand side, there's just this crazy octave chord just being played over and over and over and over while the riff is being played on the right-hand side. So it does seem a little chaotic at first.
To kind of note on that, the chaotic nature, it definitely feels like the climax of the, obviously it's the second to last song on the record. It feels like the Antichrist is on its way.
I want to note something on Prime Mover. Swindle's mentioned, and I've mentioned, there are dance beat drums all over this. Prime Mover has some as well. The verse riff has a groove to it, like a kind of a swing, which moves with the variations of 3-time. I really like the drum fill that happens at like 3 minutes and 10 seconds. It's like the strangest drum part on the whole record. It's like slightly too energetic for this record. And it's like, okay, that's going to stick out. And it's just quick. It's like a split second fill that he does. It just sticks out. The record ends like it does. You get this great kind of, the instrumental genesis sounds like credits rolling. It sounds like credits. I think the instrumental track fits. I know sometimes I'm very hit or miss when it comes to instrumental tracks ending a record because it's like, just make it a song or cut it up or whatever, edit it. But this one fits really well. It doesn't just seem like it's a set piece for no reason. It's definitely there's some great melodies in it. The the swirling, oscillating synths that are playing at the beginning of it. The band kind of kicking in is really powerful to that. And it kind of gives him a bit of a break where he doesn't have to sing.
Genesis reminds me of the Goblin soundtrack to Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes. The keyboards and all of that. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Modular synth.
Because that, well, like, Goblin changed their sound a lot. And, like, obviously they did the soundtrack to Suspiria. But, like, to me, the soundtrack of Dawn of the Dead kind of sounded more like maybe a psych. Like, it's kind of Goblin mixed with Pink Floyd, I thought, when I watched it. And Genesis reminded me of that soundtrack specifically.
That's rad.
But I also like the play on words. If Here Comes the Sun is the end of the album after the child is born.
Yeah.
The play on words, like the SON and SUN.
Japanese edition bonus track. You get a cover of Here Comes the Sun. So you got an album that came out rather quickly. All things considered. And then, this album essentially drops on October 18th. Then you play your first show on the 23rd at the Hammer of Doom Festival in Germany. And like Dylan said earlier, I mean, I couldn't imagine like this kind of ominous band, this ominous figure walking out, and it's just Papa and like all of these wild druids. I saw that they also the following day they flew to London to play the Live Evil Festival at like a 500 cap room, and Lee Dorian was there. Again, probably the first time he had actually seen the band live. Well, yes, he would have. No, that's definitely would have. But like in person, even. So that's pretty cool.
Imagine like signing this band and the first time you see it, the album's released, you've put it out, and you see them a handful of days after the album's release, and you finally get to meet them, and you're still just like, I don't know who's who.
Yeah.
I don't know who I've been talking to. What's going on?
But they blew up pretty quick.
They did.
As well. I mean,
they had a lot of supporters almost immediately.
Right. I mean, they got to support Paradise Lost on a pretty big tour the following year. And then when they made that Maryland Death Fest, premiere, you got Phil. I remember Phil Anselmo definitely being into this band, and there was like a picture of him like kissing the hand of Papa, and I didn't know this either, but they actually performed "Bury Me in Smoke" together.
Yeah, all the druids, all the ghouls. The one I remember the most is like there was an interview with like Hetfield, like around the same time. He's like, yep, I'm a member of their fan club, and that was all he said. And like they booked them for the first Orion Fest for that reason.
Right. Yeah, I think Brian Slagle, a good buddy, is the reasoning for that as well. I think he got turned onto that band and passed it along. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, Rise Above is distributed by Metal Blade in the U.S.
Oh, there you fucking go.
Yep.
The crossover. Everybody's good buddies. Everybody's just a good pal. Obviously, the band has gone on to do very, very good things, but going from, just kind of talking about origins in this record, Swindle, what do you think about the record?
I like it all right.
Good night, everybody.
I think it's it's a good, solid rock and roll record.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about y'all?
I like it a lot. Yeah, it is it kind of just scratches the itch of like all that shit I really grew up with, listening to classic rock radio stations and being into just Scooby-Doo adjacent things.
It scratches that trad rock thing without it sounding like it's trying to do that. There was a weird surge of bands from like 2001 to 2004 that were being shoved down our throats from like
all about that
by the major labels. I.E. Jet was one of them, and like all those bands that had the sound like that, and they're like, oh, it's a classic band. Wolf Mother was another
one.
Airborne was another one. I always I know I'm gonna ruffle a few of our buddies' feathers, but like the Strokes always made me think about that shit, and I could never get into it. But with something like this, years later, it's like, oh, I can get behind this because it does sound like Black Sabbath. It sounds like Blue Oyster Cult. It sounds like all of that. And that's why like Tribulation made so much sense, and Solitude and all those bands. It was a little bit more like my speed. And the big thing for this, the first tour I ever did was in 2011. And every single night to fall asleep, I would put this record on. So like I'd go to sleep while the van was moving, and I would just let it repeat all night. I remember falling asleep to the opening track and waking up at Genesis at one point. And like every single night, if we crashed somewhere, the headphones went in, this record went on. And like I just listened to it constantly on that tour. So like this shit's just all ingrained.
Speaking of stroking feathers, which I know you love doing, is it a metal record? Is
No.
Ghost a metal band?
No.
I think they are a hard rock act that has influences from many things, but calling this a metal record by standards of today, absolutely not. I think they are a hard rock band, if anything. There's pop sensibilities to it. There's all sorts of stuff. I mean, the showmanship, all about. It's probably more in line with I would even say it's more in line with like, some of the arena bands of the late 80s than probably some of the metal bands. And I think that's what his goal was all along, was to be able to play something he liked and have it hit a lot of people. I mean, fuck, they have a movie.
Oh yeah.
Like, they have a movie. Like, come on. It's that kid that got kissed at 13 years old or however old he was and saw that and went, I want to do that. And he fucking did it. Heavy metal band? Maybe not, but that's definitely where it started out in.
I think if our friend from Chain to the Bottom of the Ocean can go on record and say Baroness is not a metal band, I think it's fairly safe to say that Ghost is not a metal band.
Well, I'm going to argue that just for the sake of doing it now.
I would say that Red and Blue era Baroness is like a bit heavier than Ghost.
Oh yeah, I would say those are,
Yeah.
If we're getting down to just what is heavy, like if we're getting to a base level, without getting into like all of the lyrical and all that stuff, just riff wise, just caveman riff wise, yeah, I would say that Baroness is certainly heavier. But yeah, I think they're in circles. I think they are certainly like aligned with certain people, and they are influenced by a lot of metal acts for sure, but they've spun it in a way that is probably more true to their backgrounds, or maybe their what's coming out. Not every time is it just going to come out and be like the same just driving fucking caveman riff. It might have some weird guitar harmonies or some synth parts or whatever, or some BOC choruses, and that's cool.
It's as close to a classic rock sounding record as I think you're going to get. Like that, I would throw them. You could hear them on like classic rock radio if this band had came out 10, 15 years, 20 years before it. Probably like classic rock at that point. It's very much akin to that form of music.
Do y'all think Tobias wishes he was born early enough that Ghost could have existed during like the satanic panic in the 80s?
Oh my God.
Because he would have made so much money. Like when the satanic panic happened, just 20-year-old little fucking Slayer fans would have
Scrooge McDuck just going
flocked to right, yeah. It'd have been over.
Yeah.
So I remember I got in a conversation with some dude from a larger band at one point about this record, and he was talking to everyone like, oh yeah, I'm getting to this band. It's called Ghost. They're considered a black metal band. And even then I was like, oh, well, hear me out. Hear me out. So in the early era of black metal, first wave black metal, most of that stuff was considered black metal because of its subject matter it sang about, which was Satan, darkness, the occult. It had nothing to do with the imagery of like, I think what most people consider black metal is the second wave, which is the Norwegian stuff. Whereas like first wave is very much just the subject matter. So he was trying to like spin that on there. And I immediately just kind of thought, no, it's just hard rock. It's just a classic rock record. I mean, it's this is the type of record I would hear this next to a fucking Meatloaf record, if that makes complete
100%.
sense.
This
would play
show tunes.
It's Bad Out of Hell.
It's show tunes rock. What are we talking about?
It's just it's
Alice
fun.
Cooper's
Like
Welcome to My Nightmare. It's
100%.
all of that shit, which I love.
Yeah,
I listen to.
It's
a good bit.
It's a hard rock record.
Yeah,
that's 100% what it is.
Yeah, and that's okay.
And
it's like it's kind of like the first. It's like the first Danzig record. It's very much that. The first Danzig record's not a heavy metal record, but it's a hard rock record for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like, if we're trying to compare bands that are doing the trad rock thing and not just like taking those influences and just being a ripoff of that shit, I think we were very, I don't want to say blessed because this is a very satanic record, but I feel like we were very fortunate to get a band that is as original and probably won't see too many of these in the near future that are playing bigger size venues, opening for arena bands, having movies made for them, and being they are
the arena band.
Yeah. So there you go.
I mean, fuck. You may not like the later era records. I'm not a fan of everything that comes out on the later era records, but there's always 1 to 3 tracks I can pull from and go, it's still there. That initial thing is still there. I mean, those last 3 Halloween movies weren't amazing, but I remember the second one, which is the worst of the 3, right? And I remember sitting in the theater with my buddy Zach, and he was like going off, yelling at the screen, going off. And I said, you got to stop for a minute because I'm hearing something. And there's a track called The Hunter's Moon, and it's a ghost track. And I heard that and went, motherfucker. Like,
I thought
they're here. They're here too. Really? I liked 3 the most.
I liked 1 the most because it was like the most like all the rest of the good Halloween movies. But 3 is the one where like Michael Myers is too weak to kill and some nerdy kid. I hate that movie. That movie's all. And the whole town at the end of it, they're like passing Michael Myers like on a fucking conveyor belt to a wood chipper or something.
It made me think. I liked it better than the more recent It movies. I thought it was great. I thought it was very reminiscent of like Halloween 3, where it's not even the same fucking story. It's just like, here it is. I was like, okay, I like this better than the second one. The second one, I'll never forget watching that fucking movie just because.
In Chicago?
In Chicago.
Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies.
This has been our discussion on Ghost. Oh God.
You may not like the band's later output, but there are still songs out there. They stuck true to who they were, at least from viewing point. It stuck true to kind of Tobias's original plan of he kind of wanted to take over the world, and he did it. And he stuck true to it. He's still writing pretty good music. There's a lot of young people that are into this band, which is fucking crazy to me to think that younger people would be into this type of music, but fuck, keep it rolling.
We've reached that point of the episode where we like to share some things we are listening to, things we're recommending. My recommendation is Collapse Skull. They released their debut record, Your Father's Rage Evaporated in the Sun. At the time of recording this, it is not out, but I been listening to the singles a lot. Throne of Oppression just recently came out. This is a band that features some former and current members of Full Hell, Jarhead Fertilizer. There's a video for this single, and they also released the record part. I think versions of the record come out with like a companion mixtape that's like more just kind of like the band itself is like drum and bass hardcore power violence mixed with some like chopped and screwed like hip hop stuff. And so this is more just like straight up mixtape with some instrumentation by the band, I believe. But the record's out again, like I said, so check it out. It's pretty cool.
My first rec is the new single, Moral Death Sentence by Regional Justice Center. It is going to be on their album Freedom, Sweet Freedom. That's supposed to come out September 20th. So when this episode comes out just a couple weeks after, that's going to be out on Closed Casket Activities also. And my second rec is called The Peel Sessions by Ariel M, which is David Pajo from Slint. It's his solo project. I think this was like recorded for a BBC show in the 90s, and it
John
was
Peel.
just now released on record. It came out on Drag City Records, and it came out at the end of August. So yeah, check out David Pajo always, all the time.
So weird bit of information about those Peel sessions is death metal and grindcore in the UK owes a lot of credit to John Peel. He's one of the first people that ever championed napalm death. So that's fucking wild to like see that guy's reach is still in the modern era. I've got two. I lied just because they were both released the same day. It's hard to believe that two bands named after different bits of melanin and or enamel would release a record on the same day. Let's start out with Nails and their newest release, Every Bridge Burning, through Nuclear Blast Records. It's been 8 years since the last Nails record. Todd is still pissed after all these years. He's yelling and screaming about many fucking things. This record's heavy. It's 18 minutes long. You can listen to this band's fucking catalog in less than an hour. It's intense. It's full of riffs. It's quick. It's fast. It's painful. Listen to it. And the next release I've got is Teeth, The Will of Hate. It's their newest release through Translation Lost Records. This shit's heavy. It's pummeling. It's knuckle dragging. It's just a great death metal adjacent record. Check both those fucking albums out.
Yeah. Really great stuff coming out of California. Both those bands, California bands. That's what we got for this week. Check out those recommendations. Check out some of them can be found in our playlist, Riffs on Repeat, as well as Hits from the Crypt, Apple Music and Spotify, depending on where you like to stream stuff. Send us an email, riffworshippod@gmail.com. Reach out to us, say hey, ask us questions, tell us how we're fucking up. Review it. Also, this would be really great. Please review this show, like it, subscribe if you want, but I'd really appreciate that. Tell us what we're doing right or wrong. Let's see.
Oh, they do that a lot, don't they?
Yeah. Dylan likes to do reviews that come out most Fridays, reviews from the Dillbozer's Den. You can check it out on YouTube. Follow us at Riff Worship Pod, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So you got all that stuff there. But for myself, for Swindle, for Dylan, this has been Riff Worship. We'll see you next week. Bye.